What is up, YouTubers? It's your boy, Mark. Be sure to hit that like button, be sure to smash that subscribe button, and hit that little button at the bottom right-hand corner that sends you push notifications every time I make a video. Okay? Sounds good. Welcome back to Virtual D Groups. We just have a couple of announcements real quick. I'm sitting in the youth room, everything's rearranged, but one thing makes me sad is that you're not here with me. So we're doing a couple things so that we can all stay connected together, and we would love for you guys to be a part of it. This week during our talk, Brian and I are going to act out the video. And we're going to act out some scenes from the book Esther. So hopefully you've been reading chapters 1, 2, and 3 of Esther in preparation for tonight. But we're going to act it out, and we would love for you guys to help us in acting that out. So if you want to be a part of that, just send me an email, send me a text. I would love to get you guys incorporated, because next week I'm going to take a bunch of videos of you, and we're going to stitch them together. Well, I'm not going to do it. Carl's actually going to do it. We're going to stitch them together, and we're going to act out the entire book of Esther together with clips from you guys in your own home. So we would love for you to be a part of that. If you want to join, just let me know. Also, if you want to join our virtual Bible study, every day at 11 a.m., we meet up in a GroupMe, and we talk about the verses that we read every day. And we would love for you to be a part of that. It's been really encouraging to me, and I know it's been encouraging to a lot of you guys. It's great to hear your voices and be encouraged together during that time. So that's every day at 11. And then this virtual Bible study, after you watch this video, hopefully you're getting on the Jitsi app and talking with all of your leaders. Have so much fun. I love you guys, and I miss you guys. All the love from the C3 Student Ministry, from me, from Charles, and from Jamie. Talk to you soon. Bye. Roll that intro. Who's the guy who is so wise? He's walking down the hall. He gives the talks. It's Brian. He's Christian's dad. He's Noah's dad too. Everybody give it up for Brian!
Hey guys, it's so good to be with you again, even if it's just virtually. I have been looking forward to just this time talking to you guys. I hope that you know that that we have been thinking of you guys and praying for you. So I want to do like I always do. I'm gonna take my my phone out and set my stopwatch so that I'm keeping an eye on our time and not going too long. I want to make sure you get time with your D groups together to talk. If you can take your phone out as well, if you're not watching this on your phone, please turn it upside down and put it somewhere and just leave it there for the talk. Try not to be distracted. If you're watching this through your phone, I know that that's an impossibility, but if you get notifications, try your best to ignore them. We can look at those later. So I'm just going to get moving. I'm excited about our talk. We start talking about Esther, and I just want to address where we are right now. It's kind of a surreal time that we're in right now. Like, it feels very disorienting in some ways. Like we're not used to this, and it can be a little bit even deceiving at times. Sometimes it might feel kind of like just vacation, like summer vacation, you know, with the relaxed schedule for school and more time for video games and YouTube, etc. You know, those kind of things. But then there's reminders of serious things that are happening, you know, that kind of interrupt that fun or the vacation feel, like not being able to visit with friends and family, or maybe seeing news about people that are really hurting around the country and the world. Or maybe sensing fear in your family members or in friends or even in yourself about the virus. Or about changes in people's financial situations, job situations. And so maybe that fear, you know, is something that's feeling real for you. All of these mixed feelings, it's a little disorienting, and it can feel confusing. We can be a little dazed and confused. That's normal. When stuff like this happens, like this pandemic happens, it kind of wakes us up, it stirs us, and it interrupts our normal focus on day-to-day things that we have typically been involved with. And we become aware of something bigger happening. it can feel like nothing big was happening, and now all of a sudden something big is happening. But that's not really the case. I want you to think of like a movie that you really like or a book that you really like. Those movies or that books, they probably have slower parts where the action isn't as fast-paced. But you know that those chapters or those scenes are really important setups to what's going to happen in the action. There's still important things happening. The action just hasn't picked up yet. That's kind of where we're at right now. You may not be able to see this on the screen. I hope that we can. Carl can work some video magic here to make this happen. But I wanted to show this incredible replication of the painting that we've been studying all year, God's Story by David Arms, as it was replicated by Jonathan Cooper on the Minecraft recreation of the church. By the way, that's amazing, Jonathan. You did an unbelievable job. And it really stirred my heart, like, to be able to see that you had taken the time to do that. And it reminded me of how we have been studying this and that God has a story that he is writing. We've been learning all year about that and how we are in the third frame of that story. We've talked about it as the already, not yet part of the story. If we don't remember that, if we don't remember where we are in the story, we forget that God has had a plan from the beginning and that he has acted on our behalf to make all things new. No more viruses, no more death, no more sin, and no more fear. He's already done that, and yet we still live in the shadow of the consequences of sin, and so we're in that third frame, the already not yet. Jesus, he acted by sacrificing himself for our sin so that we could be with him and know the love and the grace that he has for us. That's so important for us to remember right now. We need a map. C.S. Lewis talks about this. If you guys haven't read anything by C.S. Lewis other than maybe the Chronicles of Narnia, start. This is a great time for it. He's a hero of the faith and is so helpful in many ways. But he gives an example in Mere Christianity about why we need a map. And he has this discussion. He had been teaching a lecture on theology and on knowing God's character from Scripture. And he was talking with this old, crusty royal officer from the Royal Air Force who had served in one of the Great World Wars. And he was talking to him after this lecture, and the officer said to him, "I have no use for all that stuff. But mind you, I'm a religious man too. I know there's a God. I've felt him out there in the desert at night, the tremendous mystery. And that's just why I don't believe all your neat little dogmas and formulas about him. To anyone who's met the real thing, all of those things seem so petty and pedantic and unreal." And you know, Lewis kind of agrees with him that our feelings and our experiences can be a great way to know God. But he makes the point that we need more than just our feelings and our experiences. We need a big picture. And he gives this example, I think it's a really great example, of our feelings and our current experiences of being like, if you're on a beach and you're looking at the Atlantic Ocean. That view in some ways is much more real than looking at a map of the Atlantic Ocean. But if you take a whole lot of people's pictures of the Atlantic Ocean from their perspectives and you put them together, you can get a fuller picture of the ocean. And then you can make a map. And if you want to go somewhere, you need a map. God has given us a map to his story, and that can bring us calm even in a time like this. I want to talk about a part of that map that's constructed through the book of Esther. The book of Esther speaks to us right now. It's this really important piece of the map. it tells us some really important things about God. Like, even when everything seems crazy and out of control, God is still at work. So for you guys who've already read the first couple chapters of Esther, or if you haven't, we've got a short dramatization performed excellently by thespian Mark. And he does a great job of recapping Esther chapters 1 and 2. In the 3rd year of his reign, King Xerxes gave a magnificent feast for all his officials and servants, showing off the riches and wealth of his kingdom for 180 days. After all of this, he gives another feast for 7 days in the garden court of his palace for all the people who were present in the citadel of Susa. Queen Vashti also hosts a royal feast for all the women who lived in the royal palace of Xerxes.
It is I, King Xerxes, and after this feasting, I would like to say that on this last day of feasting, I command that my servants bring Queen Vashti wearing her royal crown so that all people may see her beauty.
The king's servants take this message to Queen Vashti.
What? Put on my royal crown just so all the people and all the king's servants can just stare at me? No. Tell the king that I will not go.
Upon hearing Queen Vashti's response to his command,
I cannot believe that my queen has refused a command of her king. I am burning with anger. Call my wise men. I will ask them what should be done according to the law as consequences for this disobedience.
the king's wise men advised that Queen Vashti should never appear before the king again, and that her position as queen should be taken away from her and given to a better woman.
I am pleased with your judgment, and I will write letters, and once they are distributed to all provinces, in hopes that this never happens again, when everyone hears what happened to Queen Vashti.
Some time passes, and the king's servants recommend that the king search throughout the kingdom for a beautiful young maiden to take the place of Queen Vashti. This pleases the king, and so he does it.
Esther, I have learned that the king is looking for a new queen to replace Queen Vashti. You must go with all the other young women and go to the palace, but you must not reveal to him where you come from or who your people are.
Esther was known for her form and her beauty in all the land.
I will obey you, my uncle.
So Esther pleases Hegai, the custodian of the women, and she obtains his favor. After she completes her 12 months of preparation according to the king's instruction, Esther is taken to King Xerxes in his royal palace.
Esther pleases me more than all the other women here. Give me the royal crown that I might place it upon her head and make Esther queen instead of Vashti. Let us make a feast for all my officials and servants. I proclaim a holiday in provision to celebrate Queen Esther.
The title of my slide here that I have, if you can't see it, is The Invisible God, because I think I told you last week when I introduced this book that this is the only book of the Bible where God is not mentioned at all by name. And so he may seem invisible in it. And a lot of what you're going to hear me talk about from this book of Esther, I'm drawing from other teachers and who've done a great job of studying this book. And one of them is Tim Keller. He did a 4-part series on Esther back in, I think it was 2013. And in one of those, he talks about God's silence in the book, but he says God's silence is not his absence. In other words, God is still there, and you'll see him all throughout the book. And that's important for us to remember right now, because we may be looking around and saying, where are you, God? He may feel invisible. He's at work to save his people. And sometimes, maybe even often, he doesn't use big, obvious miracles. There's other parts of the Bible where we get to see him part the Dead Sea or raise a dead man from a man from the dead. But in this book, he uses ordinary circumstances and maybe even what feels like a whole bunch of coincidences, but he uses ordinary people like Esther and like you and me. It took crazy circumstances that going on in that situation to wake up Esther from just what was going on in her own life. We're going to see that. That doesn't mean that God caused the circumstances. Doesn't mean that God caused this virus. We don't blame him for evil because he doesn't do evil. But he uses those circumstances to save her and to save his people and us. Maybe we're being awakened right now, like her, by all of the disruption and the things that are happening around us. And we're wondering, how does he mean to use us right now? I want to take a look at what we learn from the first couple of chapters. Today I'm just going to talk about, I asked you to read the first 3 chapters, and thank you if you did that. If you didn't, don't worry about it. Just we're going to cover it in our depiction of it, our Mark's amazing drama, and also in our teaching tonight. But we're only going to cover the first 2 chapters, and we'll pick up from there for next week. But I want to see, what do we notice in the first couple of chapters? And again, a lot of this I'm helped by Tim Keller's teaching on this. But one of the things that we notice is a culture that is obsessed with appearances. In chapter 1, you see the king, Ahasuerus, but he's also known by his Greek name, Xerxes, and that's what we call him in the skit that we're playing out. He's the king of Persia, and what you need to know is that at that time, that was the most powerful empire in the world. Persia had taken over from Babylon, and it was a very powerful empire, and the king was Ahasuerus or Xerxes. And he is showing off in this chapter. He's throwing a massive 6-month-long party, capped off at the end by the biggest feast that you can imagine for everyone to celebrate for a week his greatness. That probably took place between 485 and 464 BC, so about 500 years before Jesus. This is when this is happening. And one of the reasons that it's speculated that he probably did this huge party and show of his strength was to gain support, to kind of hype himself and to get momentum going for a campaign that he intended against a rival, Greece. So he was doing everything to show off his power, his wealth, and his supposed generosity. And the reason I say supposed is because when he gives those feasts or he gives these things to people, he expects things in return. We'll see that. One of the other things that we see in chapter 1 is Queen Vashti, his queen, who was appreciated mainly for her physical beauty. And you even see in the story how the king, that's how he thinks of her. And when he is at this final feast with all his men and they've been drinking, he wants to show off how beautiful she is because he thinks of her as his possession. And so he calls his servants and says, "Bring her to me and put the crown on her so that I can show her off." And we see that she refuses. And when she refuses, which is an unheard of thing at that time, to refuse the king, in that culture, for not only for a woman to defy her husband, but for anyone to defy the king was a deathly kind of a thing. It was very serious, and she was banished, and very publicly, to show that the king would not have that. this obsession with appearances we also see in carry into chapter 2, where we basically see the world's first episode of The Bachelor. We see the king is told by his underlings, like, hey, you know what you ought to do? You ought to have this huge contest of all the young unmarried women, and the most beautiful, the one that you pick as the most beautiful, she can be the queen. And so that's exactly what he does. He likes that idea. Shocker. And so the women are selected and they're taken. I'm using that word in quotes because the women are taken for this contest. That's a quote from the Bible. So even maybe against their will. And the main reason that they were chosen was primarily based on their outward appearance. And that's when we're introduced to Esther, who apparently she's described as being very beautiful. And she participates and wins this contest and is made queen. Some things never change, right? I think it's not that different today. We're still obsessed with appearances. We all feel like our value is based on what we have or how we look. We feel like our value is based on our status on the team, our shoes that we wear, our car that we drive, our popularity, the number of likes that we get, or our beauty. We're like Esther. We're going through these beauty treatments. We saw that in chapter 2, where she went through all of these beauty treatments that lasted a year to appear more beautiful. But we go through these, we do things so that we'll be chosen and we'll be liked. We're not that different. So let's look at how Esther is responding. She's in this culture where she's a religious minority. She was Jewish. She's hiding the fact that she's Jewish because she's a minority there. And and the majority culture has very different values than her religion. She's not doing great. She pretty much goes along with whatever is being asked of her. And even if those things were a major violation to her religion, which they likely were, her participating in that year-long treatment probably meant her doing things that were considered unclean by the Jewish religion, and that would have been a violation to her faith. But she does them anyhow, and this even includes sleeping with the king when she is not married to him. Ultimately, when she goes to that, all of the women are made to do that. Now we're not judging her harshly here, because she probably felt very intimidated to do that. But she doesn't stand up against that, and she goes along with the culture. She wins the contest by letting the men bend her into whatever they want her to be, and going through those beauty treatments. And I just want to ask you, can you relate, guys and girls? It's hard to stand up and to not just fit in with the larger culture. As Christians, a lot of our friends don't understand why we might not do things that they will do, or that we won't act in the same way. And so even though Esther doesn't do great, this story is so full of grace, because God is not done with her. The story is not over. I want you to see God doesn't care, in contrast to the people in that time and in our time. God doesn't care about appearances. He did not come, when Jesus came, he didn't come as a powerful king or beautiful or as rich. He was a vulnerable baby in a poor hick town. He didn't come from a metropolis. He could have been born in Jerusalem. He could have been born in New York City in our time, but he chose that time as a religious minority in a hick town as a baby, the son of a blue-collar carpenter. And he wasn't wearing Air Jordans, probably Keds sandals, and he emptied himself of everything and he died a criminal's death, all for us, because he loves us, and so that we could know him and his grace. And there would be no better way for us to know him and his grace than him sacrificing himself for us. And he did that so that we could be with him forever. That's the fourth frame of the story. He gave us a new definition of real beauty, not the kind that they were looking for in Esther's time or that we're searching for. But we'll see her developing that kind of beauty in the story, because it's not a type of beauty that's based on self-obsession, but it's one that is full of self-sacrifice, like Jesus. He is the king, unlike King Xerxes. He is the king that doesn't require us to undergo beauty treatments to be good enough for him. We don't have to be good enough for him. We couldn't be. But he makes us beautiful and good enough at his own expense. When we know that kind of love, we trust him with our story because we know that he's good. Even in this part of the story, with COVID-19, where things are scary, we can trust him. When we trust him, we can be used by him, and that's what we're going to see in Esther. And then when we can be used by him, we can join in his work to save others too. I want to ask you, how can you focus on God's character and trust him with your story this week? What will help remind you of how he is good? How can you reach out and care for others this week? Here's a couple last missions for this week. The missions for this week are read chapters 3 through 5 in Esther. Study them and try to become familiar with them. See where you see God in the background. I mentioned last week, or if you didn't get to hear it, I'm encouraging everybody to make a bookmark during this time. Make a bookmark, and it should have, and try to put the words "for a time such as this." That's from Esther 4:14. For a time such as this. And you'll see this week as you read more why we're going to put those words on there. But that's our theme verse. Try and make that bookmark if you haven't. And like I said, I hope this will be a bookmark that will help you remember what God is up to in your life, in your time, for a time such as this, for your whole life. I'm making one too. I meant to bring one that Brenda already made. And I've also asked Ken, Pastor Ken, if he will make me a bookmark. He works with leather as a hobby, and I asked if he'll make one. When I get that, I'm going to show it to you. So I can't wait to have that. And the last thing is, I want to ask you to remember to pray. Pray the Lord's Prayer. And one encouragement I want to give you this week as you pray it. Sometimes when we say those words, we forget what we're actually saying because we're so used to saying the words. And so one thing that can help is by placing emphasis on a particular word as you're praying about it and thinking about it. So this week, as you pray the Lord's Prayer, put an emphasis on the word your. And I'm going to try to pray that over us right now, and I'm going to put emphasis on that word. And I'm just going to encourage you to do that this week. And that'll be how we close. So pray with me. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.